Hey, welcome to the Hoop Collective Shorts here. We are talking today with Tim Bontemps, who's joining us from Philadelphia. Hello, Timothy.
Hello, Brian.
Joining us from San Antonio, Texas, where he's itching to get on a plane back to Dallas because Band MacMahon wants to be back where he's routinely banned.
Howdy, partners. The Riverwalk, there's like a bulldozer roaming through that thing. It's going through a rebuild. I thought that was very symbolic of the Spurs.
Always thinking like a writer. You are a genius, man. Everybody says it every day. So right now we've got a couple of guys who are pretty much untradeable in the NBA. John Wall, Russell Westbrook, because they're on supermax contracts. This thing that the NBA put in 5 or 6 years ago. A couple of them are great. Steph Curry on a supermax. Warriors have been thrilled. He's extended his supermax. Joel Embiid just got a supermax. He's playing.
Joel hasn't started his supermax yet,
but he signed it. He
did sign it.
Giannis on a supermax. Bucks couldn't be happier. But the batting average on the supermax is a little iffy, and so we want to take a look at some guys who are coming up on supermax contracts and whether or not it looks like a good idea. Who should be getting these supermaxes? Supermax, yay or nay? So the guy who's going to be eligible this summer is the reigning MVP, Nikola Jokic. It's not much of a debate here, guys. Jokic is getting the supermax whenever he feels like signing it, whether he wants to go to Sombor, Serbia and go to the track for a few weeks, or he's going to sign it before he leaves town. Jokic is getting that supermax. Bontemps.
Yeah, and he turns 27 next month. He's definitely going to get it, and it should work out pretty well. Obviously John Wall signed it around the same time. He's had a ton of injuries since then. That one hasn't worked. The real dangerous version of these supermaxes are when the guys are signing around 30, between 30 and 32, and you're paying guys till they're 35 or 36. Jokic is going to be getting paid till he's 28 or till he's 32, 33 on this deal. That's probably going to work out pretty well for the Nuggets. So, and obviously he's one of the best players in the league, if not the best. Was the MVP last year. Has a shot to win it this year. No debate.
Listen, if Wendy, who is the preeminent Jokic hater in NBA media, agrees that it's a no-brainer, then it's about as obvious as you can get.
Move along, nothing to see here.
Hated him so much I voted for him for MVP. That's common the way you show hate. So a guy that'll be interesting this summer who could be supermax eligible, we don't know for sure, is Zach Lavine. Now, typically, if you've been traded, you lose your supermax eligibility. For example, Anthony Davis signed a big contract with the Lakers last year, but he was not supermax eligible because he was traded. But if you were traded during your rookie contract, as Zach Lavine was from Minnesota to Chicago, you retain that eligibility. So Zach Lavine is supermax potentially eligible. He's got to make one of the All-NBA teams. He's got a decent shot. MacMahon, is Zach Lavine a guy you give a supermax to in his 20s, coming up on his prime? Not a no-brainer, though.
No, not a no-brainer. And, I think this is like the Jazz situation with Gobert, where you absolutely are going to keep him. You want to keep him. You need to keep him. Full supermax, I think that there can be a middle ground reach. If you're getting more than max, not quite super max, I think there's a number in there where the Bulls and Lavine can come to agreement where he's still getting more than he could get.
So that's a
significantly more. It's a no, but he's still going to get a huge chunk of change and more than he could get if he decided to leave.
But that's sort of the situation these teams get put in, right? If Zach Lavine makes third team All NBA, he can make, $50-60 million more over the life of the deal than if he doesn't. And that's like the spot the Bulls are in. Like you said, the Bulls are having this great season. Everything's going well. They clearly want Zach Lavine to stay. Part of the reason they made all these moves, right? Getting Nick Vucevic, getting DeMar DeRozan, getting Lonzo Ball, was to convince Zach Lavine to stay. They're clearly going to want him on the team. So if he makes third team All NBA, he's going to go to them and say, hey guys, I made third team All NBA. If you want me to stay, give me the supermax. And they're going to have a hard time saying, Zach, we want to give you 80% of the supermax, but not all of it. He's going to say, yeah, guys, I want the supermax. Give me the supermax.
It's still like, instead of getting an extra 70 million, he might get an extra like 30 million. It's still more. It's like
Maybe.
super maxi.
I mean,
you
if,
know,
if I'm Zach Lavine, I'd feel, I mean, listen, I know there's not a lot of teams with cap space this summer, but if I'm Zach Lavine, I'd be pretty comfortable sitting there saying, hey guys, I'm eligible for the supermax. Give me the supermax. Like it's going to be, you know, that he's sort of the definitional example of, you know, one of these guys that I think in a vacuum probably isn't a guy you'd want to pay all that money, but because of the situation his team is in, and they've sort of got him over a barrel, that if he wants to stay there, they're going to have to pay him.
But he has more of a, but it's not like he can leave and get that from somebody else. So it's like, okay, listen, we're offering you more than max. Like, you're going to be so upset that it's not full super max that you're going to leave dozens of millions of dollars on the table to go to a worse team.
Oh, look, I mean,
that's why we're talking about this. That's why it's not easy.
Right. Maybe that's how it ends up going. But I think I think the point here is he is kind of the definitional guy of you would not feel comfortable giving him the supermax, but you might have to.
Yeah. All right. How about this guy? He's a year away from being eligible for this. So we're getting a little bit out, but a guy in the middle of his first max contract has very good chance to be supermax eligible. Devin Booker of the Phoenix Suns. Keeping in mind that the Suns owe Chris Paul. They've got Chris Paul on the books for some serious money later on this decade. And I assume they're going to be signing DeAndre Ayton. They don't have a deal with him yet, but that's going to be a guy they're going to have to pay. Supermax money for Booker would be big, but he is obviously the driver of that bus. Chris Paul's a difference maker, but Booker is their present and future. Bontemps, I think if Booker qualifies, you're giving it to him.
Yeah, I think he's a little better than Zach Lavine, but I think it's a very similar conversation with Devin Booker, where, I mean, look, and they've also made the finals. I think they're the favorites to get back to the finals again this year. Like there's a difference there in playoff equity. And frankly, just career equity. I mean, he's been there his whole career. He signed, you know, he's already signed one max extension with them, but he's another guy where I'd be a little wary of giving him all that money too. But the one thing about Devin Booker, he's also super young. He was super young in his draft class. So again, you're signing him till he's 31 or 32. I feel a lot better about that than if I'm signing, you know, like when Damian Lillard signed his and he's going to be a super max guy till he's 35, 36, like we're seeing with Russell Westbrook, like we're seeing with James Harden. You're paying guys into their mid to late 30s. That's what things get dicier. So yeah, he'll get signed by the Suns, and that'll probably look pretty good based off how well he's playing and where his age curve is.
If he doesn't get the supermax from the Suns, can you imagine the PR hammering that cheap ass Robert Sarver will take?
Right.
I mean,
right.
Come on.
Yeah. I think there's no chance that he won't get the full boat assuming he qualifies, which he might not. I mean, there's a lot of really good guards. Like again, you gotta finish in the top 6 among guards, all NBA. For as good as Devin Booker is, that's not a guarantee.
Well, there's a pretty good chance that either Booker or Lavine won't qualify because there's only so many spots. Right now, I think pretty clearly Booker is ahead of Lavine in that line.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Where's Donovan Mitchell on that line, MacMahon? Mitchell's at the start of his contract. We're still a couple of years away from this.
He's behind Devin Booker right now. And if you don't believe me, just ask Rudy Gobert.
That's what I was setting up for. Gobert compared. Is that a nice way of saying it? Compared?
He didn't compare. He just used Devin Booker as an example of a star from another team who's playing his ass off defensively.
He subtweeted without actually using Twitter. Donovan Mitchell's got to be healthy. A lot of things have to go that way, but is Donovan Mitchell a player in Utah? Like I remember back in the early to mid 2000s, one of like sort of the shock max guys was Andre Kirilenko. The Jazz gave Andre Kirilenko a max contract, and it was like, wow, really? And the Jazz were kind of like, it's hard to get people here. It's hard to keep people here. We kind of have to pay a Salt Lake tax. By the way, there's two sides to that coin. Not having as much attention also means you don't have to deal with as much drama. Trust me, if Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert were playing another market, they would be getting discussed nationally a lot.
Yeah, imagine if they were playing for the Knicks.
Oh my God, Stephen A. would be going on about that
every day.
So they had to pay Kirilenko back then, and I think for the same reason, if Donovan Mitchell continues to play well, they're going to be thinking about trying to
Yeah.
lock him down in Utah with that big giant paycheck.
These guys are all shooting guards who all are not among the top 10 players in the league, who all are in situations where their team is going to have to give them supermax if they're going to stay.
Right.
Like they're all based. These guys are all different versions of the same story.
Yeah, and Donovan Mitchell, he's going to get whatever it takes to keep him in Salt Lake City. Like so much of what they do with the Jazz is attempting to make sure that Donovan Mitchell stays in Salt Lake City long term. And Phoenix should have the exact same approach with Devin Booker.
Chicago did the same thing with Zach Lavine. Like we said before, they went and got all those guys to win this year to be like, hey, Zach, you can win here. That was what they were trying to do,
All right, so Boston, now this will be interesting, Bontemps. Boston has two guys who have the potential. Jaylen Brown is closer. After next year, Jaylen Brown is extension eligible. Again, he's got to make an All-NBA team to qualify.
Yeah,
he may not make it.
He's actually extension eligible after this year. He's supermax eligible, but he's supermax eligible if he makes All-NBA next year.
That's not going to be an issue. He's not an All-NBA player. He's a very good player. He's not an All-Star this year. He's not an All-NBA player.
Well, does he bet on himself and wait to extend? That's the question.
It will be very interesting to see what happens with Jaylen Brown this offseason. Jaylen Brown is a really, really good young two-way wing player who's scoring 25 a game and can guard people. That's a really good player.
This is just my guess. My guess is if you polled a bunch of executives, they would feel like McMahon would feel. They would feel he's not a supermax player.
I think he's in a similar grouping with all the guys we've talked about. But again,
right. But if Donovan Mitchell gets it, I could see why he's like, hey.
I don't think he's as good a player.
Okay. No, I think he's a little behind all those guys, but I also don't think he's that far away. And again, this is another situation where if he averages 27 a game next year and so let's say the Celtics win 50 games next year, which is possible. They make some tweaks of the roster. He plays he's been pretty good when he's been healthy this year. He scores 26, 27 a game. Let's say he makes third team All NBA. Pascal Siakam was second team All NBA 2 years ago and qualified for a supermax deal off his rookie contract. Like it would not be crazy to say that Jaylen Brown had a similar year and the Celtics had similar success as a team. And then the Celtics are in the same position these other teams are in. It's like, all right, well, if we want to keep Jaylen Brown, we got to pay him.
Yeah. Well, then you got his teammate Jayson Tatum. Again, he's a few years away. He's just beginning his max deal. I think Tatum, from a talent standpoint, is right up there with any of these guys. Like sheer gifted abilities and everything.
He's got a higher ceiling than any of these guys.
I'll tell you what, if he's not supermax eligible in a couple of years, it'll be a huge disappointment. Forget about whether the Celtics are going to give it to him or not. He's good enough to get there. He needs to get there. That's my opinion on it.
He's already been an All-NBA player. Last year he was an All-NBA, but he had an even better year than the year before when he did earn that honor. You're talking about a guy who has perennial All-NBA talent and is still years away from his prime.
Yeah. Jayson Tatum has a higher ceiling than all the guys we've talked about. And if he keeps playing, I know he hasn't been hitting a lot of shots this year, but if he keeps playing the way he has the last couple of weeks and he starts attacking the rim on a regular basis, there's not going to be any discussion about Jayson Tatum being a supermax guy. Cause he's a big time talent and, he's got the ability to score 30 a game. Like if he wants to be in Boston, he's going to be in Boston and he'll be getting the supermax.
By the way, we're talking about guys who are all in their second contracts right now, looking for the supermax in their third. We're not talking about Luka or Trae Young, who have extended their contracts, but they're not in it's too far away.
Not talking about John Morant, who's probably All NBA this year and an easy supermax.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure.
I'm not forgetting anybody, am I, guys?
Not so far.
Yeah. So, there was this feel that the supermax was this great asset to teams to make sure they kept them in markets. And you can tell by just some of these, like there's been some tough calls in the past. It's worked against some teams. There's going to be some tough calls in the future. And there's going to be some easy calls.
Listen, I'm going to say this though. It worked out great for Oklahoma City with Russell Westbrook. Now he's on the fourth team in his fourth year of a 5-year supermax deal. But they were able to get Chris Paul and a pack of picks and then flip Chris Paul for another pick. So
it worked out great because they almost instantly traded Russ. And that's
they were able
thing
to keep
about
him.
it.
They signed it and they were able to keep him and to keep the asset.
And they traded him fast. Not only did they keep him, but they traded him fast. Because you look around at these contracts, again, it's the same thing. When you're signing these guys until they're 35, there's basically one guy who in his mid-30s is still awesome. That's LeBron James. Everybody else,
I got news for you. He's in his late.
Well, now he's in his late 30s, but that's my point. Yeah. Like, you look at him.
Define mid-30s because Kevin Durant and Steph Curry are pretty.
Those guys are in their. Those guys are approaching now their mid-30s. So like, we'll see where they are in 2 or 3 years. They both could qualify for that too. But you look at all these other guys, like they're all falling off as they get to 33, 34, 35. So and that's where you're talking about paying these guys.
LeBron never eligible for the Supermax because it wasn't around. And even if it was around, he kept changing teams and wouldn't have qualified. So he's getting paid just fine. Don't worry about him. All right. Thanks for watching the Hoop Collective Shorts. And we will talk to you guys soon.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN Plus.